US government is now one of the most widespread purveyors of disinformation in the world. I'm not saying that we are number one. Maybe China is number one. There are many other sources of disinformation. But the idea that they put out disinformation and we put out truth is pure nonsense. Now, when the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up, the United States government came out and said, whoa, this is something that was done by Putin. This was done by Russia. And Biden said this was a, quote, deliberate act of sabotage. So Biden was basically saying that as far as he knew, the Russians were behind this. Now, there's an article, new in the Washington Post, quote, U.S. had intelligence of detailed Ukrainian plan to attack Nord Stream pipeline. And it says that although the Nord Stream pipeline was sabotaged in September of 2022, the CIA in June of 2022, months earlier, not just knew in general they're going to do it, but had detailed plans of how they were going to do it. And this was then reported to the White House, so Joe Biden knew about it. So we can start with the simple fact that when Joe Biden goes out there with a straight face, this is a deliberate act of sabotage, he knew that the Russians were not behind it. Well, leave aside the fact that Russians have no motive to blow up their own pipeline. But he knew that it was our team, you could say, i.e. the Ukrainians, who supposedly had been planning to do this and were about to do it and then in fact went ahead. Again, I use the word supposedly, and I'll come back and explain why, did this. Now, let's think of what the U.S. government is now admitting. Our official position is that we knew that the special operations forces by the Ukraine were going to do this. But who are these special operations forces? Well, it turns out these are people that are being trained by us. So it's the U.S. military, it's our CIA that is working hand in hand with these special operations. We train them. And so we can't pretend that we have nothing to do with this. Even taking our official story at face value, the US government is actively involved. And actively involved in doing what? Think about the significance of this. It's not just an attack on the Russians. It's an attack on a pipeline that was part of a deal between Russia and Germany for Russia to sell oil to Germany. So we're blowing up the ability of one of our own allies, Germany, to have access to energy. And in fact, there was, immediately following the blowing up of the pipeline, a kind of energy crisis and an energy shortage, which continues to this day in Europe. So this seems, even again, taking the official narrative at face value, to be reckless, to be irresponsible, to qualify to some degree as an act of international terrorism. And again, the defense that, well, we knew about it, we had the plans, these are guys that we have trained, but we didn't do it, doesn't really make sense. There's a preposterous line here in the Washington Post article, and that is the White House declined to comment on a detailed set of questions, quote, including whether U.S. officials tried to stop the mission from proceeding. So they're not saying we tried to, and they're not saying we didn't. This kind of coyness, and think about it. This article is based upon a straight out leak from the intelligence agencies to the Washington Post. The Washington Post guy is like a typist. He's a stenographer. He's getting dictation from these agencies. This is what the article is. So what we're getting here under the guise of media is straight out U.S. government propaganda. But you know what's the biggest propaganda of all? I don't even think that any of what I just told you is even true. And what I mean by that is the idea that the Ukrainians, think about this, you have a country that is really thousands of miles away. The idea, it's a 10,000 mile journey from Ukraine to the site where the Nord Stream pipeline was sabotaged. Are you telling me that the Ukrainian Navy was able to, undetected, send these commandos and sail without anyone's knowledge, 10,000 miles round trip, blew up the Nord Stream pipeline with their own Navy SEALs? Well, guess what? The Ukrainians don't have any Navy SEALs. And guess what? Ukraine doesn't have a Navy. So there's no way they could have done this. My point is that the United States, I think, is behind this. We're trying to blame it on the Ukrainians. They're the ones who were invaded. They're the ones who had to fight back. But the truth of it is, even the official narrative, even the correction to the official narrative that's being put out today doesn't make any sense at all.